if you are in this religion, you probably do have values that are at odds. This is what liberals don't want to recognize. You may be from a country, as there are many, many Muslim countries that either have Sharia law or want Sharia law. Those values are not our values. This idea that somehow we do share values, that all religions are alike, is bull. And we need to call it bull.
HBO's Real-Time host Bill Maher criticizing liberal support of Islamists and Syrian refugees. Let's continue now on Newsmax Prime as we note that in Texas there are new security concerns after more Syrian refugees reach the international border separating Mexico and the United States in Texas. According to federal officials, another group of Syrian refugees turned themselves in to immigration authorities along our border with Mexico. This brings the total to 13 Syrian refugees who have turned up at the border that we know about. For more on this, let's welcome in Dan Stein. He's the president of FAIR, or the Federation for American Immigration Reform. He joins us from Newsmax Washington. Also in Washington and joining us via Skype, the host of The Agenda on the Sirius XM Radio Progress Channel and the one-time advisor to Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid, Ari Rabin-Havt. We thank you both for your time. And Dan, at this juncture, is it time to close down the border completely?
Look, there have been serious concerns about the way we administer our refugee resettlement programs, how we screen people who qualify under UN definitions as refugees, as well as how we treat people when they show up at the border. Our asylum process has very lax standards for verification, independent third-party corroboration, actual verification of identity, criminal background, whole range of problems associated with the refugee and asylum admissions process. And there's no question about it, the American people are basically telling this president, instead of lecturing us, why don't you secure the borders and do what we feel is important to protect our communities and our national security?
Ari, the left appears divided on this issue. We just heard Bill Maher say that it's wrong to rush to the defense of Muslims and Syrian refugees without acknowledging that their values are not our values. What's wrong with what Bill Maher said?
I think it's the same thing that's been said with every wave of immigrants that have come into this country. It was said about Jewish people in 1938. It's why the St. Louis saw the lights of Miami and then was turned towards Europe. You know, it's been the source of so many mistakes we've made. It's why the Holocaust Museum made a statement on this issue. That's why it's wrong.
Well, Ari, can I ask you, the folks on the St. Louis, they made no threats against American citizens, did they?
The folks, I don't know of Syrian refugees making threats. They are, look, in Syria right now, whose lives are at risk? It's the lives of Shia Muslims, frankly, who are being slaughtered by terrorists and ISIS. They're the most at risk from ISIS. So the theory was about those Jews on the St. Louis was there could be Nazi infiltrators among that group, and that's why.
Boy, I've never read that in my history book.
Over and over again.
I never read that in my history book.
That's beyond ridiculous.
I never have read that.
The people on this shouldn't be a debate about the St. Louis. This is 1938. Those were mostly children on a boat that originally went to Cuba. They were sent back to countries that were not under Nazi domination at the time. And unless you want to give Franklin Roosevelt the kind of telescopic vision into the future to know what was going to happen ultimately with the Third Reich, that's a completely absurd set of statements.
Well, let's focus on the here and now. Let's focus on the here and now and at least the short term. We have suspicions of what happened in France a couple of weeks ago. There were Syrian refugees involved. Isn't that suspicion enough, Ari, to say, whoa, hold on a minute?
Well, you can have suspicion of anything. We've admitted 785,000 refugees to this country since 9/11. Of that, we've had issues with, I think, a dozen have created issues. I think that's an excellent track record, considering nothing in life is 100%. You know, so no, I don't think that's enough, actually.
Well, let me turn to Dan for just a second. And there is a difference between immigrants, refugees, and illegals coming into the country. And the thing that flummoxes and frustrates a lot of us is this in addition to those who come to our nation illegally. You've got about 30 seconds, Dan.
Well, look, we've had a complete collapse of U.S. immigration enforcement, border control, interior enforcement. Whether people are coming as refugees, asylees, asylum seekers, parolees, deferred action, or whatever crazy law Obama makes up tomorrow, the bottom line is there's bad vetting, we've got an assimilation problem, and it's a threat to our public safety. And ultimately, we're really going to have to do a whole top-to-bottom analysis of whether or not we're admitting immigrants and refugees based on our national need or some ad hoc thing based on some foreign policy objectives of this administration.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to ask you to pause right now because there's a lot more to discuss, and we will do so. Ari Rabin-Havt and Dan Stein, both joining us from Washington. Our discussion on immigration, our border, and national security continues here on Newsmax Prime right after this. The number of people illegally crossing our southern border is on the rise again. According to new data, Border Patrol agents caught more than 7,000 unattended children, most of them not from Mexico, trying to cross into Texas in August and September alone, an 85% increase from 2014. With that bit of news, let's welcome back in our panel from Newsmax Washington, Dan Stein of FAIR, and via Skype, likewise from the District of Columbia, Ari Rabin-Havt. Gentlemen, we thank you for staying with us. Dan, what is behind this new surge, and what does it mean going forward?
Well, increasingly, the evidence is that the Obama administration continues to send signals all around the world, including in Central America, that if you get here and say the right words, you're going to get to stay. And in fact, that's true. With a virtual collapse of interior enforcement, hearing dates years in advance, you know, I think the Republican candidates, JD, have an enormous opportunity to really lay it on heavy now in the way this administration, this is the one-year anniversary of the 10 Obama administration memos that virtually destroyed U.S. immigration controls and enforcement. There is no immigration enforcement any longer. Naturally, the word goes out in these countries in Central America. Admittedly, they have violence there, but there's violence all over the world. But in the end, when people get the message that if you come here illegally, you're going to get to stay, not surprisingly, more people come in. And this administration keeps telling the public, well, this isn't happening, but it is happening.
As we used to say in the South, as we say, it's equivalent rhetorically of y'all come on in. Ari, how do you see
y'all
it?
Come on in.
I mean, we're talking about children here. That's the increase. You're talking about children making an incredibly dangerous and deadly journey. I mean, earlier this summer, I spoke to people who worked with the Pima County Medical.
I know Pima County. What kind of parents would send their children unattended unless they were in on the fix, Ari?
The parents who know their children's lives are at risk in the country, they are seeking safety and asylum in the United States, and we should give it to them. And,
well, let me just add, with all due respect, Ari, we always hear the rallying cry of the progressives. It's all about the children. I've got to tell you, with all due respect, and Dan, I'd like to get your perspective on this, children are being used cynically as a prop to keep this border open. Where am I wrong on that?
Well, look, some of these so-called children are 17-year-old members of cartels, and the cartels and the smugglers are also involved in making a lot of money off these weak entry controls the U.S. has. Remember, too, that many of them are coming up. The younger ones are coming up, some of them with mothers. They're coming to join fathers who came illegally earlier, and they want to get in on the next Obama amnesty. They understand far better than the average American citizen that you come here illegally, you get caught, then you never get a hearing. The hearing date's 2-3 years in advance.
But I got to give Ari a fair hearing. Ari, you get the last word. 30 seconds.
I mean, the idea that there's no border enforcement, which I keep hearing during this conversation, there's no immigration enforcement is actually ridiculous. Like, we're finding these people because they're turning themselves in a lot of cases as they cross the border.
That's the only reason.
Well, and the other thing that happens, the other thing that happens, a lot of folks get here, they get their OTM card other than Mexican, and their notice to appear, which means a notice to disappear. Given where we are on time, we're going to have to disappear soon. Ari Rabin-Havt and Dan Stein, gentlemen, we thank you for an invigorating, passionate, and enlightening conversation. That'll do it for this Monday night. Looking for you tomorrow night. Until then, stay brave, stay free, stay tuned.